So I did my audiobook on Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I had not read the book yet. I had only seen the movie, and I have to say that the book and the movie have a lot of similarities uh, when it comes to getting the main theme across, which um, there are different themes. Some of the themes that I saw were love. Um, there is just a lot of hope and love for the two um, main characters to end up together, which does happen, which makes me very happy. Um, Another theme, I think, is the struggle between the upper and lower class. Uh, there is always that kind of struggle in a lot of these novels, but I think mainly the reason why it is a theme is because that was the lifestyle back then, and a lot of things like the importance of marriage and the importance of the male to lead the home, and just the um, lack of education that young girls received has a lot to do with just that struggle of upper and lower class, and just how the lower class was looked down upon. Another theme is just the pride versus the prejudice. It is the title of the book, and it's pretty obvious. But I think that they have a lot to do with um, the theme of the book. The main character is Elizabeth Bennet, or Lizzie. She is a very well-rounded young lady. She is smart. She can carry herself in a conversation, especially with the upper class in different instances in the book. And she can um, play the piano not very well, but she can do many things. She's the second of five girls, and when Mr. Darcy and Mr. Bingley come into town, uh, Mr. Bingley automatically goes to her sister Jane, the oldest, and she is offered to dance with Mr. Darcy, and Mr. Darcy, being a very prideful, arrogant, boastful man, denies her the opportunity to dance with him, and that is when Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth um, begin their journey to find out who they are in light of one another, which is so romantic, but at the same time, it's really interesting just how different both of them are. One's very prideful, and one's just very prejudiced, and they end up together in the end. Um, I think it's really interesting that Elizabeth is prejudiced of Mr. Darcy because she has a lot of reason to. I give her a lot of credit. I think that she has a right to be. He's just not the kindest man. But even though she is that way, I think Mr. Darcy really appreciates her, and he falls in love with her before she even thinks about falling in love with him. And he's just attracted to her because she's a well-rounded young lady, and she's different from her sisters, who are just obnoxious and immature and similar to Jane, but still just different. The story goes that basically these five girls do not have a brother, and so their parents cannot leave the inheritance to them. That is just how life worked back then, and so they're trying to find someone to inherit all of this, and so they want their daughters to be married, and the mother, Mrs. Bennet, is just a really obnoxious woman who wants her daughters to be married quickly and doesn't even care about if they love that person or not. She just wants them to get married. That happens when Mr. Collins, who is the clergy man from Lady Catherine de Bourgh, who is a very rich woman, he is one of the prospects to inherit Mr. Bennet's inheritance, and Mrs. Bennet doesn't even care about her daughter when he proposes to Elizabeth, and she completely denies him, and she is like, "What are you doing? Accept it. He wants to marry you. He will inherit this. He will take care of you." But Elizabeth doesn't love him, and she does not accept it. And I thought that was really interesting. I think some of the motifs in this are definitely marriage. Just um, the hope of being in a relationship, of being loved by someone, and not just marriage because you have to, marriage because that's the only option, that's the only way out. I think the true view of marriage is highly viewed. And travel is really interesting, and I think it's a motif because every time someone goes from place to place, something changes, or if they return from a certain place, they're coming back to finish something that they started. So I think that is really interesting. Symbolism, I would say that there isn't a lot of symbolism in this book, but one of the things that I thought was symbolism was Mr. Darcy's house in Pemberley, because that represents change for Elizabeth and also Mr. Darcy. I think Elizabeth begins to see in Mr. Darcy's home that he is different than what she thought he was. He's very rich and very extravagant, but he's a humble man, and she begins to warm up to Mr. Darcy, and even the idea of him loving her because he had professed his love for her before, and she denied him the right to marry her. She obviously didn't know him yet, so I think this is the moment in the book where she just is different and begins to warm up to Mr. Darcy. If I were to say a thesis for this book, I would say that in Pride and Prejudice, Jane Austen presents the two extremes of being too prideful and too prejudiced, and how that affects relationships. And that doesn't just mean for Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth. I think there are different people in the book that are prideful, and there are different people in the book that are prejudiced, not just the main characters. And those two things really affect how people think about each other. And in the end, when two people are humbled, they get to see what they were missing when they were too prideful or too prejudiced. So I really enjoy reading this book and listening to it. And if you have not read it, I think you should. It's very different. It's Jane Austen. It's kind of hard to understand, but you get the main message across if you pay close attention. So go read it.